This is Power 102 Digital Monday. Welcome to Hard Talk. Today's Hard Talk, hosted by Karen Nunez Tesheira. She has a very special guest on the topic today, corruption in its various iterations. Good afternoon, Karen. I'll allow you to welcome in your guests.
Yes, and I have a feeling David, he didn't want to pronounce Mr. Suya de Vara. I have a feeling he didn't want to say the name of the guest because, like myself, I've been trying to practice. Where do I put the pronunciation? How would I put the pronunciation? Because it's an unusual name for Trinidad, even for Trinidad. It is an unusual name, at least for me, as a last name. But having said so, let me just get down to first thanking David, as always, as David McIntyre, who makes sure that we are on time with the program. And he's also does the selection of the song that leads into the program and is always very, very relevant. So I want to thank him. And of course, we always thank our listeners, which we are digital, so we go all over the world. And we look forward to their comments and, more importantly, for them to actually join us by calling in and making a comment, asking a question, critiquing us. We don't have a problem. We all learn from that. So, having said that, and before I do the proper introduction to our vice chair of the Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute, I hope I'm getting that right. And he's going to help me with his pronunciation of his name. I will let David just pull onto the for the screen the numbers that people can call if they wish to call in, and we do want you to call in. We want you to be part of this discussion. It's not just us talking to each other. We hope that I know you're listening, but we'd like you to even be part of it. So, David?
Yes, well, I just put up the banner there, but you
Yeah.
can call in at 222-8255. That's 222-8255. 866-525-1099. That's our toll-free number, 866-525-1099. We are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube, so you can send in your comments.
Right. So you got that out of the way, and we say good afternoon to our listeners. So you're going to help me with your pronunciation because I do not want to do injustice to this pronunciation, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who you've had to help to pronounce your last name. The first name I think I can manage, Ravi, is an easy thing for me to manage, but the second one is the challenge. So could you pronounce it for me?
Surya Devara.
Yeah. Surya Devara
Surya.
years ago, who said you're putting emphasis on the wrong syllable, but we're going to put it on the right syllables.
Well,
Surya Devara.
in my place of birth, it's Surya Devara.
Okay,
We don't
where's
we don't stress the ya that much, but in local parlance, it's Surya Devara.
And could I ask, which was not intended to be the next question before I introduce you formally, but as you said, in your place of birth, I suspect it is not Trinidad or Tobago.
No, I was born in India.
All right.
I came to Trinidad at the age of 3 in '76. My mom and dad were on contract with the government as doctors. You hear about migrants all over the world now.
That's well. That is the talk in England with their elections with Brexit, and I think they are
I
soon.
here with my parents, and I've settled.
Clearly.
The thing there, and please call me Ravi. May I call you?
I'm going to do that because I think that's a mouthful. And of course, you call me Karen. Yes, of course.
So, Karen,
can I just introduce you formally first, and
sure.
then you, because also too, the intention is the conversation, which is what it is a co-hosting, meaning that I'm going to talk, but I'm going to listen and learn from you, but I will put in my 2 cents, so what it's worth. And so it's not I don't have an interviewing style. I'm not an interviewer. I was never trained in that, but I do try to do as much research on a topic. but I have my subject matter experts, and they're the ones who fill in a lot of the holes and the understanding for the listeners and for myself. So before, let me just say that you are the vice chair. The chair is Miss Charmin Ann Jack Hill. I think she is the
Donna,
chair.
Donna Jack Hill.
Oh God, I gave a new name. But anyway, the last name, Jack Hill, is her last name, hyphenated. And you are the vice chair. I looked up a little bit about you. But in fact, I just did a quick, I went on your website. I think you have a very good website because with your website,
There's public
what I,
disclosure.
huh?
There's
What I
public
found on
disclosure
your
requirements.
website, it gives you a good
Background.
the background of the different members and their own respective backgrounds, what you'll do, who you're about, and so on. So I thought it was a very good website. So using that as my guide in this discussion, of course, because you are our guest today, the focus is going to be on you representing the institute, of course, in that capacity. But you are previous to being the owner or CEO and co-owner of a major valve and fitting company called Trinivalve. You have had several executive positions in Trinidad and Tobago in insurance. You've been an entrepreneur, an activist, an HR advocate, and you apparently have spent a good bit in time in petrochemicals. And of the BSCs that I've had come on the show, you're the only one with a
Right.
nuclear engineering BSc from Penn State, and everybody knows Penn State is one of the top universities in the United States, if not in the world. And you did your MBA at Arthur Lockjack School, Graduate School of Business. So that gives you a background. You're a member of a number of institutes of, the highly respected professional institutes. And what I did look at, they are not on the show, but what I did look at other members, and what I found was a commonality, except perhaps Miss Terry Deal Ince was, and I mean it in this way. And everyone seemed to have come from a very professional background, worked, although you're an NGO and you're not private sector, have backgrounds not only in banking and financial sector, but have worked. Some of your members have worked with TNTech, Angelac, Greenlac, and different private sectors. So I just need to put that on the table because the reputation of Transparency International is one of NGO non-political affiliation. So I'm going to hand it over to you to fill in a lot of the holes in what I've said to introduce the institute and especially the work it does in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. Firstly, on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute, thank you for having us on board this afternoon.
Yeah.
It's an NGO. It's been
Yes.
around since 1997. It was actually founded at the behest of Mr. Reginald Dumas, who recently passed. He is one of the founding fathers of the Institute. He invited Transparency International to come down and visit. The chapter formed in 1998. And subsequently, since then, we've had various iterations of governance over the Secretariat.
Yeah.
Culminated in annual anti-corruption conferences, integrity clubs. Spawning out of this initiative is the Trinidad and Tobago Extractive Industries Transparency and Energy Industries Initiative, which Mr. Victor Hart also now sits on and chairs. Sorry, let me correct myself. Sits on. I think he is recently removed of that responsibility. So TTTI.
When you say removed of that responsibility, that's a curious way to put it. So I just want.
No, I haven't kept abreast of it, and I think Mr. Sherwin Long is more frontal now because I know I haven't spoken to Victor in a little while, but
Yeah.
he's been, how to put it, less
Yes.
active,
Like you put it. Less what?
less active, like myself.
Okay. Yeah, that's not a problem.
So
Everybody.
I came back. I got elected to this board in December of last year, and I gave up public advocacy um, in various NGOs, and I came off the ICAT tribunal in April as well. My term has ended,
Mm.
and I opted for this voluntarily because it wasn't sufficient just being by myself in my own thoughts and watching what is going on. After you engage in some mode of public advocacy, it wears you down a bit. I've seen what it does to people. So if you look at the history of TTTI, you'll see turnover. You'll see a core group of people really driving it, but you'll see a level of turnover because it's a lot of work. Um, it's a lot of sacrifice you give of yourself, and sometimes life throws challenges at you where you simply can't continue in the things even though you want to. So there's been some attrition, no different than any other NGO, but I think COVID really hampered the NGO movement, not only in Trinidad but globally.
Mm.
Sustainability and funding is always an issue for NGOs, and when you go for that prolonged period of isolation, uh, to restart the momentum in things you were working on, to restart relationships, it's a huge task, and it's something that we're rebuilding on. So when I was considering and I came onto the board, I know this was going to be an uphill battle. So the current board and I, um, we've taken on the challenge, and we kind of packaged it around the theme for this year, the broader work. So the work we do in integrity clubs, the work we do with the free legal clinics right now in conjunction with United Way, the work we're going to do at the soon-to-be anti-corruption conference on October 24th. That's just save the date details to follow. Um, the work continues, but there's a couple of nuances now that I think not only for engagement in this topic, but just societal engagement. It's a challenge. People are detached in the society we live in. People don't feel part of. People's day-to-day challenges, at least to me, it appears that they're overwhelming their sensibilities and their aspirations and their values. They're being put into situations where they have impossible decisions to make. And the human experience has just come under significant duress. But as we started the conversation about immigrants, I'm an immigrant. And I will safely tell you, no matter how stressful Trinidad gets, Trinidad and Tobago has given me the life I enjoy, and this is where I will die. So as bad as it may get, it's in the cycle of anything organic, up and down, good and bad, laugh and cry. But it is at that moment, I decided to come back to do some work with transparency. Another pivotal feature with TTTI is um, political neutrality. So you can't be engaged in any um, political action if you're going to sit at the board level or be involved in the governance structure. So, that appealed to me because we're in a space where it's too polarized. There are no safe spaces for conversations. It's
Okay,
just,
so that's where I'm gonna go and ask the uncomfortable questions too. And yes, I am involved in politics, but I keep that out of my show.
yep,
I keep that out of my programs. I told you that, and because at the end of the day, what matters the most is the country, and we mean Trinidad and Tobago, and your fellow citizens. That's what we all want. Because when we all do well, regardless, we all prosper. If you get a job, you will employ people. If you could employ people, first of all, you act as an inspiration to family members and to others who felt they couldn't do it. But they also are earning an income. They get the sense of self-worth and self-esteem is built up, and their ability to contribute to the country is there. But what we did not really get into, because when I listen to you, you may not, and that's just my takeaway. So I might be very wrong. There's a sense of what should I say? I would not say that you are cynical because it's too strong a word. It's way too strong a word for me to use. But I will say there is a level of fatigue that I pick up listening to
It's
you.
borderline. It's borderline cynicism. My optimism is waning.
Okay, that's how it comes across, and I have no doubt it has nothing to do with you as a person, but whatever
So
challenges you have to meet. So
the
you need
public, the
you need.
public advocacy element has
Mhm.
opened me. It has taught me a lot. I've had to
Okay,
learn about law, economics, um, just different subjects other than what I professionally do. Um,
okay. So
and
let us start from the beginning for the gas. There are two things I want. We all know about the corruption perception index, and we
correct,
do know that people do watch how we are rated. So from one point of view, even if the whole of Toronto Tobago is not attuned to the work of the institute, one thing they do look at, even the man in the street does look at, is how we rank. And I know we're not ranking very well. So I know that's one thing that your advocacy and the work you're doing helps. So I think what I wanted to start with, because I sort of, and I say I would take that responsibility clearly, because when I asked if you all would come on, I said, Karen, you need to go and look and see, and I did find it right away, by the way, to the credit of the website and your institution. I I said to myself, well, what is corruption? So I wanted you to answer that. And then if you can pivot or go into, you said that what sort of gave you that little bit of oomph not to give up was the advocacy part that you got involved in. I don't know of, and you have to forgive me if I don't know, but then you have to say to what extent, apart from everybody being aware of the corruption perception index and how badly, I think we do. I think we're 41 or 40 out of 180 countries. That's not good. And there's a breakdown on how you arrive at that. So I think everybody would look at that for investment purposes, for all kinds of purposes.
correct.
There are lots of reasons why people use it, good and bad and in between. But I wanted you to say what really is the meat, bread and butter, or the meat and potatoes, whatever, or the bhaji and aloo of the institute in how it defines corruption. Because I did look up and I saw an example, a very good example. So could you tell us what the corruption you are talking about, you are, and what it is you're trying to do about it, and then what seems to have given you a little lift, so to speak, is the advocacy component.
You give me a very difficult. That's
Mhm.
a difficult question. I mean, corruption. There's a dictionary version, but I'll give
Yeah.
you my interpretation. Right? Is corruption is the avoidance of proper process of gaining unfair advantage, be it physically in things or unfair advantage in knowledge or access, um, which tends to skew the system from a competitive position, and it does not engender for viable competitive outcomes.
Okay,
So,
that's really high talk, huh? You talk
no, so
some really high.
corruption. What essentially is corruption? It's a wrong. It's you've done something incorrectly. It's frowned upon. But I want to be careful here. This is what I was telling you, starting off in the beginning.
Yeah.
The world has changed so much, right? So
Yes.
watching US politics now, you have a former president who's been indicted on 34 counts running. That challenges the natural logic of things. You wouldn't think that somebody runs for public office with that, but there's a constituency that is represented in that, and he's being successful now. So there's a lot that has changed. Some places in the world, corruption has, like bribery, for example, has become what they call facilitated payments. It's become a way of life. Um, and it seems, you're saying my optimism is getting slowly waning. I'm a numbers guy because I'm an engineer by profession, right? So when I watch the numbers, um, and when I watch data sets, you kind of see the trajectory where it's going. Forget what is being told to you by leadership. So if you listen about the financial trajectory of Trinidad and Tobago, if you watch the hard numbers, it's not reflected in what I see on the news. We have falling gas production, we have falling revenues, we have increasing debt. Um, our debt to GDP has exceeded any paragon of benchmarking. We've been borrowing on the trot for the last 14 years. And I know some of this may be knowledge that's on the back of your hand, but I say that because I see no action for consolidation, and amelioration is just stacking on more debt. So it's no wonder that the younger generations look to us and they're detached. That's why this experiment they call democracy in its various versions, it's a lot of hard work. They see an inheritance of debt. They see an inheritance of bad practice. So that's one. Compound that with improper practice, malfeasance, etc., corruption generally. All right. So how do you start speaking to the issue and start talking about proper practice when there's no set example for them to follow? They are becoming the bearers to pay the consequences for actions not of their own. So all this debt we rack up, they're going to live in a country that has to pay that back and be part of the socioeconomic fabric. So then when you come now and you start talking about corruption, you can see where it's getting frayed. And at the heart of all of that is we cannot continue to become a country in decline because all it seemingly is doing is reinforcing that despondency, right? So, but like with all things in nature, the balance will be restored, whether by an intervention or naturally. We're going to reach a point. Every country goes through it, every company goes through it, every household goes through it. You can't have non-sustainable behavior. Simply put, you could do what you want. You can't do it for how long you want. There's always some reconciliation point. And in the life of us, in the life of the country, it's a very short space of time. But in the life of us, in our lifetime, 20 years is a long time. So kick the can down the road. Corruption.
I'm going to use something from your own website. So, yeah, and I thought it was helpful to me because not only did it give a very short, brief definition, but it went on to show a way it can manifest itself, and also not always agree, and the consequences of that. So I'm taking from your website, not Tesheira putting these words in, right? So, and by the way, when you use the example with Trump, what even makes it a more matter of concern is that the Supreme Court has said that he is immune from anything he did whilst acting as president, whatever that means. Whatever.
So you see, Karen, you're framing it correctly now. We are fighting for values and for principles in a world that's being distorted, right? So there's this governance structure we call democracy, right? There's a thing called the Constitution, that's the contract between the governed and the governors, right? It lays out, in our case, it lays out the parliament, it lays out the prime minister's role, the commissions, the TTPS. It's all a framework there. It lays out in section 4 the inalienable rights of citizens, and there are 11, right? Not the least of which is that the right of the government the right of a citizen is no more or less than that of the government. right? In the eyes of the Constitution, we're equal. In the eyes of the Constitution, you are free to have a political view and express it. There's nothing wrong, as we converse.
Actually, that one is unusual to Trinidad because I was having a habit of pointing my finger. Let me try not to do that. But actually, that one, when they had that issue with Mr. Pandey and he was being sued for defamation, I think when one of the arguments, because I had read the case, normally the Section 4 provision, which you talk about, the human rights provision, freedom of expression, which is not in there are limits because I could sue you for defamation. You know what I mean? You could say any and everything. You can't call me a thief unless you could find a thing that show that I was convicted of it. So it's not a right that has no limitations attached to it, but it is spelling out your rights as a citizen. But we, I think, are one of the few countries, because I know they argued that in that case, that we had a specific provision that said that we had the right of political expression. And that was an unusual inclusion in our constitution. But I'm going to back it up a little bit again, because I will back it up a little bit again, because you will, and I know you understand that because you come from that type of being a CEO and running a company. You always have to have a strategic vision, but it has to start from how you see yourself. And I think how we see ourselves, the sections in the Constitution, are supposed to give put into words how you see yourself as a democratic republic. But if you read the preamble, when you read your preamble, you want to talk about that?
Well,
I don't have it in front of me, but because I can't have you on and I don't have it written down.
No, that's fine.
You can go ahead on it, because I thought the preamble now is that we elect you to go is a position of trust and confidence, but we put some markers, and we have said to you, this is what our expectations are, and those expectations find expression in in our constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. So even before we go to the Section 4, which is the human rights provisions come out of, whereas we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, what do we want? What do we expect from as being governed? And how is that expressed in the Constitution? Because the Constitution now gives life to what you say is what you're saying about us, we the people. So I'll let you.
So coming back to your definition of corruption.
Yes.
So Transparency International defines corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. Okay.
I'm reading it right now, actually.
Yeah, it erodes trust. It erodes the very fabric of the democracy. It's not a good competitive position economically. So framing it in that, right? So if it is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain, let's break up that definition a little.
We have some people joining us, and anytime they join us, I'm happy. Yeah. So
sure.
Hi to one of my normal one person that joins us every week. I think I could call his name, Mr. Montano. Good day to him. And I have someone new. I don't know if they want me to say that, but I will say that. Let me just say, 60 years of corruption is hard to weed out. Then the same person, obviously feels strongly about it, said no rights in Trinidad and Tobago. Open your mouth, feel the political whip. Which you're right about that one. And the last one, that's the truth. The last one is when you're fearful of challenging an incumbent political head of a party, fear of reprisal, that is oppression. Where are the rights here? Dictatorship in action. And that's how a lot of people feel.
Right.
So
you see, while those are not my personal views, I can understand those views. It comes from a position of their own personal experiences, Karen. And that is more common than I give credit to. The more people you speak to know is the general concept. I don't think the government sets out in the day to be like that. But
please, I'm going to give you so many examples. And what you
no. So I'm taking a very nuanced approach to this. I don't think anybody sets out the day to upset people and do things like that. But what has happened over the fullness of time, the Constitution, the issue of corruption, the approach of societies, democracy, it's become evolved. So we have a set of rules in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago that has not flexed with the times, in my view. Right? We live a different life than what that speaks to. And that, in setting up the governance framework, is governing a past point. It's not governing a current point, right? So we're using principles, but the unique thing about our constitution is we enshrined institutions into it as well, and we enshrine structures that they haven't morphed, they haven't changed. They're very much monolithic. So study the point of view of the population, right? There is an abuse of entrusted power. That is the general view people will tell you. So one thing we're doing at Transparency is this year our chair wrote the Attorney General in February asking for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to rejoin the Open Government Partnership.
What is that? What is
the Open Government Partnership? It's a convention between government and civil societies in various countries where a work plan is established for transparency, civic engagement, open data, essentially affording more sight publicly to information from government operations, right? So our space has improved over time through the Freedom of Information Act and public filings, but it is nowhere near the extent I think the citizenry would feel more comfortable with. For example, recently a member of the institute, one Mr. Afro Raymond, wrote an article saying he supported the valuation rules for property tax, right? But that should have been crowdsourced, for lack of a better word. Let open market operations determine the accuracy, let tenants see, let other landlords see. But the access to the valuation rule is only on the public sector side.
Okay, can I tell you something right there?
Yeah.
And I said it on another show because I did read that critique that he gave, and I thought it was I thought it was something that I should look at. And I'd had other shows where of course, I was involved with the Property Tax Act, and it was passed while I was the minister. So I was very much involved in it. And it was a very good point that he did make. So it's not that I am critiquing what he said, that is a deficiency that he brought out. But what older people or other people who were familiar with the former repealed pieces of legislation, which was the Land and Building Act, which was passed since 1920 or something, but came into force in 1948, and the Municipal Corporations Act, which was part 4, that dealt with house land rates or house rates, which is the equivalent of the property tax, the residential property tax. It was repealed and replaced. But in both legislations, I went and looked it up, legislation, I don't know if that's correct English, but in both pieces of legislation, there is provision in the Land and Building once a year that you are entitled, they will put up a notice, and any member of the public who has an interest. So if you are in this district revenue area, you have a right for 2 weeks of the year. They will have the books available for open inspection by members of the public. Because I said, let me see whether it was, because this person who had called in on the show before was so adamant that, I could have looked. I said,
no, so you're correct.
Municipal Corporation Act also has provision that as a certain period of time, once they have given there's something they have to do first after the operation meets, but then they have the open book. And the reason for that is the transparency, the accountability, and let's be frank about it. I want to know if the house next door to me that looking like a mansion, that on the same street as mine, not on 2 streets across, because Trinidad is a small country, and on the same street as that my house is, big mansion, and when I look to see the tax they're paying is minuscule to the tax that I pay when my house, because I know the property tax was never intended to be like stamp duty, where they have to be much more get valuation. They're very rigid about, strict about that. It serves a different purpose. And so when you take away that right that you enjoyed under two older pieces of legislation, and it is not included, and I am saying that now, and I think it deals with the issues you're talking about, transparency and accountability.
So I'm coming to that. So we're talking about open government partnership, right? It's more open data on government action for us to understand as well, right? But in this case, in this particular case, having access to the evaluation rule, you see that exact point you said? If the government is intent on ensuring uniform, consistent application, and the data set is out, you have to go through that process of interrogation and interpolation to arrive at that. People will look and say, well, how is this different from that? And that's how you check and balance the system to ensure they're consistent numbers across the board. We live in a country where a piece of land or property can have multiple addresses, okay? And that's not right. So there should be unique addressing systems, and tethered to that should be the taxation value. I understand there'll be a market value for whatever buyer may pay. But in assessing taxes or in assessing the rent the government may do, there cannot be a disparity because the value of the property changes depending on the position, if the government is collecting the tax or if the government is a tenant. So, and then there's the insured value, which is another value on the property, okay? So the point about having this data out is for public scrutiny. So it is what it is. If there is a measure of privacy being exposed, I agree. We'll have to figure out
what is it you don't want me to see?
Well, no, it's not about that because
it is about that. It is about that.
The same Article 4 also enshrines your privacy rights. So, and this also applies to data not only for the government but any organization transacting with you.
So we can apply that. So we can apply that to procurement contracts then.
Well, we have to apply that across the board. So what I'm saying is this is the challenge. Even in that 2-week window, I don't think that is sufficient to allow the market space to interrogate it. There has to be a different modality where that is checked. If you want to tear the access, like how accountants, lawyers have access to the registrar's department online, except through professional services so that you can qualify it, I'm all for that. I'm all for that. There has to be some discernment and some regulation of the access, but allow the access to take place. For example, I live in Princestown. I hear about this health data and dengue and all of this. 890 something cases is the headline in the paper the other day, right? Karen, between me and you, south of me for a mile is 895 cases, I would suspect, okay? Because that's all the community is talking about. That's all the community.
No, I'll tell you what the community is talking about. Sorry to be Ravi, and I am not here at all in a political role, but I'm here, which I think ethically, and it is unethical in my view, and the fact that it is an issue for the country, and we are talking about transparency and accountability, and we recognized it in the 2 previous pieces of legislation, and Mr. Raymond wrote about it. I should be able to inspect the books because what it does, it is good for the government. What it says to the government, it says to the government that we are transparent, that we are accountable. And guess what? We are saying that if you see my assessment being so much higher, especially if it's a townhouse or a complex like that, where you're not even in separate pieces of land, there is provision for persons to make challenges. I have paid my property taxes, by the way. I have found them to be fair, by the way. I have one little one to pay. So I'm not arguing with them, but I do believe people should see it.
No, Karen, we're on the same page. There needs to be access, right? The modality and the frequency and the open market operation. I'm not an expert on this, but there are data privacy issues I can recognize in security. I think it has to be done in a manner that
But
is safe.
to find out what your property tax was. That's all I want to know. All it put is
No,
even if
so
it's the
no,
name
not
of the
that the property.
person.
What I'm saying is just not the property tax or the valuation rule. The Open Government Partner Initiative is where this information, you don't have to go through an office. It's easily accessible. You don't have to wait for 2 weeks in the year. If you want to know, for example,
I get what you're saying. You're saying don't limit it to 2 weeks.
no, so you shouldn't have to go in.
Right. I
You
got what
shouldn't have to go in and make a request. These are things active management should be putting out. And
Well, right. Well, under the old system, you didn't have to make a request. The reason why it was those 2 weeks, I understand. I think I understand what you're saying. It was because after a particular period, you would be going into another cycle. So the end of a cycle, that
and
was
then
when it would let
yeah,
you see books. But what I'm saying is, I hope we are on the same page. The modality, I think that you are advocating is one that is more it is one that is it is not just for a 2 week period, but at any time period, and you can put checks and balances, but it must be done in a way that
so let me show you something else on open government.
People have a problem of a lack of trust in the government. And
Well,
by the way, the lady who said what she said to call her name, and I'm calling it. Her name is Diana Benskin. She said, call my name. So I called it out.
okay, so no, so we're on the same page with that. So the Open Government Partnership is now being actioned through the Ministry of Public Admin. By the way, we were in fact part of the Open Government Partnership, but between 2016 and 2018, we didn't action our plan, and we were deregistered in 2019. So we as TTTI have inquired and encouraged, and we're heartened to know now that the Ministry of Public Admin is waiting, I think, for an action through Parliament to get it restated. Now, it's not only for property tax or financial matters. It could be for civic engagement. It could be for equal opportunity cases. There is a plethora of government data that's not being mined. So let me make the argument for you. A private sector company grows over a period of time, and if it kept doing the reports it historically did, it's going to miss what they call the metadata now. Finer trends, developing markets. The data sets are getting so huge, you need to have a way of processing them, right? So it's the same thing in the government service. You could just imagine this magnified for the entire country, right? It's volume. There is worth in that engagement. There's always worth in civic engagement to test the veracity and the consistency of that. And it is only through those tests that confidence is restated, right? So at the beginning of this year, May, we had a gala dinner to kick off. And the theme was restoration of the people's trust. You see what we've been speaking about since we started, and partly my waning optimism is that fact, the restoration of the people's trust. I think the people's trust has taken hits.
Can I give you an answer to that? Can I give you an answer to that?
Sure.
And I'm very sorry if I sound cynic. That I think is. Oh, I did get a Mr. Passad always joins us, so I have to recognize him. There's a Mr. St. Louis who's not being very kind to me, but I will say it because he said it. But we're not going to discuss it because the issue is not about me. We just say, by the way, we recognize the passing of Mr. Dupre for all the errors that he did make and all the mistakes that he did make. He did a lot for the country. He lost his way. That's my personal opinion. And he was surrounded by persons whose objectives were not the interest of the country. But that's all I would say. And the only reason I'm mentioning it because I don't want the person to say, well, I'm saying something negative about you, but you're not going to read it out. So we're not going to discuss it because that's not why you're here. But I don't think it's fair for him to be able to say that, oh, she's reading things that not controversial. So I just read it out, and we won't, and we leave it at that. And you're not here to discuss that anyhow. Mr. Vernon St. Louis said, talk about how you knew to withdraw Clico money when you were there. you were quiet. So I said what he said, and that's the end of that. At least I let him say what he wanted to say. So I
No, so
learned for that. But I want to say this, Mr. Ravi, this is what I want to say. And this comes from the experienced, fortunate, or unfortunate. And this could be any government. It happens to be this one. You're there 10 years. Why can't you start a National Statistical Institute? You know, a
yes,
lot of
I'm glad you raised that.
no, it's not that alone. I can give you a million things. The
So
procurement legislation,
I'm coming
the
to
not
that.
a post box. When they think we regulations not ready, they now pass another one called Part
Karen,
6.
you're making my argument for me.
What I mean, you know, but what I'm trying to tell you is it seemed as though you were saying to me, and with all due respect to you, and I will withdraw it if I am misread you on this, but it seems to me I am getting from you that there's so much to be done, so much a plethora of information out there that to expect any government, whoever that government may be, to be able to put into place the things to restore people's confidence that they see things happening, you're being unreasonable. And I
No,
am saying to you,
no,
oh, you will not see that. Okay,
no,
so you
no.
can correct me now.
I am quite saying the opposite. The
Okay,
reason
good.
for the disaffection and the reason for the restoration of the people's trust and how we feel like this is because I don't expect any 5-year term of the government to fix all these problems. But
No, never.
I can see efforts to start addressing the issue. So you said the Statistical Institute. We're saying open government partnership, open data. We're talking digitization. We are talking more scrutiny, voluntary scrutiny of public accounts and government action so that there is an improved confidence in the democracy instead of sometimes the contentious positions taken now. So I also remember telling you in the beginning, I'm a creature of numbers, right? So when you take a look at the outlook, our gas production is at 2.5 BCF, and it's hovering around there from a heyday of 4.2. We have plants under strain.
I thought it was 1.4 actually. That's
Pardon
what
me?
I read. I heard the Prime Minister, this
So if I'm
Minister
tracking the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries website, they
said it was
have,
1.4.
well,
That
no,
we
they
have a shortage of 1.4.
correct. So the shortage is about that. But the actual production is hovering around 2.5 BCF, 2.4
Right.
BCF.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
So until that primary driver goes up, we're not going to be making more money because it's just the state of affairs of how the economy is configured. So I'm just watching how the debt is piling on, right? So at some point in time, if this was a private sector operation, you're going to come in, you have to consolidate, and you have to right the ship. You have to have a conversation about changing habits and changing ways.
But Ravi,
So
I have to say
let
this. I
let me
have
finish the point.
to say
No, let
this.
me finish the point. They always
Go
tell me
ahead.
I'm
Go
naive
ahead.
and governing the country is different. I agree. But
I
as
was
you
going to
rightfully
say that actually.
no, but as you rightfully said, there are even small steps that can be taken, and that's what we in TTTI are advocating for, which is transparency in government operation, in the data behind government operations, so that you don't have to consistently be fishing around for it. I think that will increase civic engagement. I think that'll actually help government. So that's one thing we are working around to combat this corruption. When you talk about abuse of entrusted power, there's a common perception that the gatekeepers, um, if you review your experience standing up in a government office, etc. I mean, you're in these long lines, and then you see somebody come and cut in front of you. They know somebody. These things have to work a little bit better, a little bit smoother. They have to be obviously better offices for them. I'll say it like this. Some days, some of the government offices I walk into, so OSHA applies to private sector individuals. But the government in enforcing OSHA, even in some of these offices that they have, I'm not quite sure how the inspector didn't see it. So there's an inconsistency in the application, Karen. And
Can I just
before,
say, can I know, I have to interject here,
tell me,
because I know what you talk about the long lines. But one of the ways which you all talked about, there are many ways to skin a cat, and there are many ways for corruption to find itself. And you actually use the example of the underpaid workers, the loopholes. You also gave examples that people may not easily, it's a misuse of a position of a powerful person.
facilitated payments.
But what I'm saying, what my point is this: one of the ways that you keep the corruption going is having, and in fact, Jamaica has dealt not with all, but with a good many. So they've had some successes, and not as many successes as initially were hailed. But one of the things they did is they cut out, if there were 20 steps, 10 steps in the bureaucracy to achieve a point, they found out, why do we need 5 of them? Let's cut out those 5. But you know why those 5 stay? I don't say that's why but why it could stay is because every step on the way up envelope could pass. Because you know why? Oh nah, today he didn't come out to work, the doctor's supposed to sign off his certificate and only he could sign it off. You don't have to wait till next week when he think, oh, she gone on leave, you have to wait 2 weeks. Now if you took out, if you focus rather than the long lines, right, and you decided as Jamaica did with their land issues, because the land issues became very complicated when people pass on land without doing probate and all of that. If you take out a lot of those steps, one, you automatically taken out a lot of the bureaucracy, the opportunity for corruption, and the leveling of the economic inequality. Because what it does is the man who is in the 1% of wealth in this country, which Friedman's theory has been so much thrown in a dustbin with Thatcher and Reaganomics. It has been so thrown in a dustbin, right? Because these people who get wealthy, nothing wrong, they have money. But the idea that the rich will then go and invest in the economy, get upstart businesses, increase employment, etc., the reality doesn't happen. That's human nature. So coming back to the bureaucracy point, if I have 10 steps in the bureaucracy for me to open up a business, that's 10 things I have to go through before I can get Ministry of this to give me this certificate and that certificate. There are people at the 5% there who can call the Prime Minister and say, make that land that is state land, which you had for which you are being charged and your equipment is being held and there's an injunction against it. Make it now no longer state lands, but you now have a license from the Commission of State Lands to use the land. That's the corruption you all should be talking about. And if you really want to get rid of corruption, I'm not talking about anybody. And one of the main ways is cut out the bureaucracy. Less steps there are to achieve point A.
Right.
Less opportunity there are for bureaucracy, for corruption, and greater the opportunity for leveling the playing field, because the man at the top bet your bottom dollar. I was in government, so I'm not talking out to the top of my head, right? The man at the end there, he will sit down on his desk, and that approval will come on his desk the next day. And that poor little person trying to make
So
the 10 steps
you
can't
hit
make it, because every way along the step, they tell him, oh, we changed the rules. Oh, it's a new law.
you hit the nail. You hit another facet of the nail on the head, right? When you say corruption, it is so wide and all-encompassing. It's varied and it's morphing. We are 7 directors and 2 staff in this NGO, and we have the same struggles. That we are not kitted to handle the mosaic of corruption that we're discussing here. So that's why we have had to prioritize. We are not saying all of these other aspects are not relevant. We have zoned in on what we think we can make a material impact on, and it will have an impact. So open government partnership, encouragement to get the government to sign back on and to start engaging on an action plan to look at government operations for open data. That's a plus. What we're also doing.
Man, the street could relate to what you just said.
No, but this is not a man in the street issue. This is a mechanism of sophistication. Everything is not going to be about a man in the street issue.
Okay, that's true.
We want to integrate into the modern world. The man in the street wants to be respected in the modern world. To do that, there are going to be things beyond their comprehension.
Yes.
There are things beyond my comprehension. I depend on others to do.
Yes.
And that is why I'm saying with open data, the trust, you don't have to ask for the trust. You can look for it yourself, and that's how the trust gets restored, right? You don't need to trust. And one of my pet peeves, if I may say this tangentially, is national debt. National debt is an amorphous number in this country. The government, any version of the government since 2000 come forward, we have ballooned off balance sheet borrowing, unregulated, and that is a conversation for another time, right?
Well, actually, can I just say to that, your Minister of Finance, because I'm not saying anything out of thing, because I do support, obviously, I was in government then, and the Revenue Authority was passed in the lower house, because at that time, it's ballooned to much more, but we knew at least $5 billion was not being, the government was hemorrhaging at least $5 billion that it could have to run the country, run the hospitals, schools, whatever it is, because people do not pay the right taxes with the revenue.
But I want to say this in rebuttal to that. And then I want
I'm going to say what the minister said. What the minister himself said. So it's not me saying this. It's he said that. So I'm not I am not giving a version. I don't have it in front of me, but
no. And what I'm saying is over the fullness of time, you run an operation that is inefficient. You have known that your tax net is inefficient. And after 50 years, you now want to come and complain?
No, but you know what I'm trying to say?
To be fair, Corporation Sole, Minister of Finance, be it whatever version or franchise of government that has held office, has absolute control over the public space where finances are. What more authority does he need to get public entities
to come? You know what authority needs? Because I was Minister of Finance, so I think I could. I think I have a little bit of ability to have an opinion on it. You know what you need? There's somebody called a Prime Minister. You think I could do anything? Listen, I don't think people. I feel maybe.
I'm coming. I don't want to get into the.
Yeah, that's not getting into politics, right?
No. So what I'm saying.
What I wanted to say is what he said. He said.
I agree. I agree.
You were talking about debt. You were talking about debt in the country.
I know, but let me bring it full circle.
Okay.
When you're managing people, and you go to them and tell them, okay, so this is the issue. If you say this is 100% your fault, there's no situation I know where that occurs. Usually, I have some complicit percentage in that interaction, be it 2%, 5%. The government as the executing agency, the Board of Inland Revenue, the Ministry of Finance, has known this for a prolonged period.
Yes.
Okay? The efficiency of tax collection has never been a priority in the early years when we were flush with cash, okay? We were flush with cash in the boom years. It is over the last 15 years, subsequent to the 2009 crash, and then the super cycle saved us a little bit, but we are currently a hydrocarbon province that is mature on the decline right now. We need to reinvigorate the hydrocarbon province or reinvigorate ourselves. But, taking a slow slide into the murky darkness is not an option. We're a sovereign state. We have a future. We have leadership. We have to make a decision.
Can I just respond to what you said? Because you are the one that raised the issue about the debt to GDP. And for people who, it all sounds economic mumbo jumbo. It's as if the GDP, as I've said on other shows, but no problem repeating it. I had Marla Tukaran on last week, and I will please say it. It's all the goods and services that our country produces in a particular period, which will be the fiscal year. That's not the government's revenue, The government taxes goods and services, right? So when people say we have a GDP of $100 million, let's say, that's not the government's revenue. It takes its revenue, it taxes that. So the tax structure is an important player in it. And your tax implementation or your will, and by the way, I would not say you were correct about what you in this sense. There was a time many years ago. I don't like to call any government's time, but you know when oil prices collapsed several years ago, and we had $354 million in foreign exchange. We had almost zero in foreign exchange. So the question that you needed to have a tax system that was more robust did not occur when the country acquired money. When the country had no money and was on an IMF standby arrangement, and I think Mockley was the minister, and I thought he did a pretty good job in getting people to understand, listen, we can't give you cola, we can't give you this, we just don't have it, but give us a chance to get it right. The tax collection was just poor. And I, as minister in government, it was not only inland revenue, I also oversaw customs. And I can assure you that the problem of why it stayed how it stayed for so long as it stayed, part of the reason, I cannot say all the reason, I can certainly say that part of the reason is there were people who benefited from it being just so. And I would imagine the persons who would benefit from it being just so are those at the upper echelons and not at the lower echelons. So there was no will to change that. So when the will came about, because now where we are, just as how you are.
It's not a will, it's a necessity.
Right. And you have said it several times, because I see you have a background in the energy sector. And you said the deficit in the amount of natural gas that we have. What you're not saying, and what I think should be said, it's not 5 years, it's going on 10 years. In 2018, and this is a large part of the problem of the lack of trust. This is what I'm saying. I don't know what Transparency International role is in as an advocate and also making people more aware, because to be very, and maybe it's my fault, I would take responsibility, it's my fault that I am not doing enough to make myself aware. But what I would say is, he himself said, I think at paragraph 29 or 19, that we depend on the energy sector for our revenue. And without it, and the Prime Minister said it in 2019, he said, we really like to have 4.9 million cubic feet per day. We had up to 4.1, but we're now down to, I think, 1.1 or 1.4. But I think anyhow, we are that piece, okay?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying to you, I think the reason why, and I could use a simple example, anybody could understand. If you were running your family and you told your family members that you were going to go into a business and it would take about 2 or 3 years for the business to really bear fruit, but it would bear fruit, and they could see you doing it, and in 3 years it did bear fruit, not as much as you'd like, but started to bear fruit, you would have trust and confidence in the head of the family, because you're seeing the work and the effort there, and it is being realized. But when you're being told the same thing over and over again in every budget cycle, over and over and over again,
so Karen,
upon excuse, where is Transparency International?
Right, so I want to. So, government open partnership initiatives. That data needs to become more transparent. That's the first thing. You as the public, you as an individual, you as an entity you can arrive at your own conclusions on the data sets.
Right.
We can't be quarreling about the data, right? Because government data being put out. That's the first thing. The other thing that I want to bring you to notion on this is the way we were governed, right? The way the politics influences the governance, right? Nobody catered for this disruption. Nobody catered for the viability.
What disruption? That we run out of gas?
Well, clearly.
Well, wait, excuse me. When your minister went on CNN,
what I'm saying, listen to me.
No,
I know listen to me. I know it's a terminal asset. The prince in Saudi Arabia has said oil and gas is a terminal asset. I need to get it out of the ground before anybody else. So this is fine. But I am talking about the governance in Trinidad and Tobago. We have never prioritized sustainability positions in all of these things that we've done. How are we going to pay for it?
So how is this institute going to help? We're coming back to your
Right.
why you're here.
Right. So
How
open government partnership for data sets is one thing, but there are
what
three
does that mean again? Is I'm going to have more information about
open
system.
government partnership (OJP). It's
Yes, I'm going
an
to
international NGO.
right,
Has a little bit over 100 and something chapters.
right,
Um, and it's set up with civic society, government, and engagement. So the country has an action plan
right,
around. So you see all the indices you referred to earlier, where we get measured on things.
right,
These things are important,
right,
and these conversations speak to that. So if we don't like, for example, how we are assessed by UNDP on a per capita basis or a
right.
GDP basis on things, being a small island state, it's unfair to us off
Yeah,
the get-go.
yeah,
We can't change the entire system. So
yeah.
there's ways we can participate in it to put our best foot forward, right? So,
How does that help? How does that help?
well,
I
one is
mean, in a real way, how does that help? It sounds like a lot of um, a
so,
lot of stuff.
so the thing is
How does that
when
really help?
people look at
I'm being honest. I don't mean
so,
to be
so when people look at the
something
jurisdiction,
supportive,
so if we are to encourage investment, right? These things inform decisions whether we like it or not. People get the information about the jurisdiction, so we 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 still have to attract investment.
Who's the we that has to encourage
We, the
investment?
country.
The
It is
country
not the
being.
government's role alone. It is in all our interest to attract investment, right?
So,
So,
so having said that, I know you're not an economist, neither am I, but certainly in the context of Trinidad and Tobago and where we are at, I don't know, I always pronounce it wrong, Lee, but I'll try my best. Keynes model as being the driver of the economy rather than using the Friedman model, which is deregulation, and that's why we are 2008 started. In other words, in the leader in this, I would think, I agree with you, the private sector must partner with it in a fair and equitable manner that lets everyone get an opportunity to uplift themselves. They'll never be millionaires, but certainly uplift
right.
themselves from
So
that place.
how does that help us? It helps us in the global
Yeah.
assessment when people are looking to come in to do business with us. Okay, so at the
Yeah.
end of the day, to be a jurisdiction where you have transparent transactions, you have rule of law, you have
Right.
capacity to expatriate your profits, you have shareholder rights protected.
Right.
People, these are general things that
Yeah.
I think by and large over the years we have gotten correct, right? But then there's the social overlay, the crime, the social infrastructure. So there are a lot of indices that assess all of these for various jurisdictions, and from an investment profile, open government partnership helps you get those correct. So some of these might
Would
be
you put it down? Would those, can I just ask, because just for me to be clear, because you gave good examples. So in open partnership, would you have a thing for each of those areas that you have
well,
identified?
it depends on the
Then
action plan. You get a steering committee that's established, and then they create an action plan for the country. So the government, the civic sector engagement, and others who are on the committee come up with those parameters, right? I'm just speaking in general terms. I don't know what the committee will come up with. But you ask what's the benefit? Apart from that, apart from having open data internationally and benefiting you locally, for citizens to be more informed and exercise discretion in their judgment, we're also working on three principal pieces of legislation that we think pushes the anti-corruption fight forward. One, the recently passed whistleblower legislation. We think that is critical.
very important.
Because,
Yeah.
as you rightfully said, even from some of the comments you read out, you get victimized for calling out what you see. So
Yes.
the whistleblower legislation now to be assented and operationalized is the next steps we're watching.
Yeah.
The Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, Act 1 of 2015. I have many personal views on this act,
And you are not alone. Many people do.
none of which I shall share.
I know. I understand. You're here in a capacity.
I know, but that act, in spite of it being slow walked over the last 9 years. It's here. It has to get functional. And, like with any other piece of legislation, there's going to be amendments and the likes. But the one pivotal part that we don't see greater transparency on is government to government relations and, international foreign relations and privacy arrangements always
And,
swirl
and that
around.
is why and that is why people have concerns. I'm not saying anything.
No, there's no, but
I'm just saying this is
Karen,
a
why did
view.
I raise debt when you can't go in,
China,
when you
China
can't go
is
in
a
the open
country
market?
which does
No
not have the same mind
value.
understanding. Well, I don't want to say value system, but the checks and balances that you will get from an IMF IDB loan, which is why the legislation in its first iteration said that these contracts, of course, they had to turn it around because they were contradicting themselves. But it's essentially saying these international agreements with these international agencies would not have to be have oversight of the procurement regulator because they are so stringent that our requirements would not
Well,
surpass theirs.
I'll
But
tell you
with
what.
China, that is not the
But
case.
I won't isolate China alone in this.
But that's who we deal with a lot, you see.
Well, amongst others.
Okay, well,
The point I'm raising in that is when you can't go in the open market or you are constrained in the open market to borrow as a sovereign, you're going to go and do more government to government relations, especially if they have moratorium periods where you don't even have to pay the debt for the first 10
but
years.
you don't think, listen, I'm sorry if I seem very cynical. You don't think they knew that's what they were doing? You don't think that they knew that's exactly, because I saw an Express
So listen to me. That's what I'm telling you. This is why I am losing optimism. I'm seeing the numbers being deflected all over the place. I'm seeing things not reported. SAPA and NAPA are still being paid for.
Yeah.
They are still being paid for. The helicopters are still being paid for. The boats from the last administration, they're being paid for. These
are they working though?
No. So listen to me. When you watch the budget document and you read and see what we're paying for.
Okay, but I want to see with your institute, because
right.
it's not fair to put all that on you.
The Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act.
Yes. What is your rule?
Our role is really right now to continue to buttress the act. There are some things. How to put this?
When you say buttress the act, I'm a lawyer, by the way. So you're not under
currently there is supposed to be the public procurement plans for public entities presented and the annual procurement plan that the procurement regulators to present in Parliament. It's been tabled and being reviewed, but it's not available in the public space.
Were they supposed to have tabled that last year and they didn't do it?
Well, there's a deadline that has passed, and
and then somebody had to bring it up, which was not
you see, remember what you were telling me about the property tax? There's a 2-week window you can look at the book. This is what it looks and feels like.
Why don't we hear more from you all? Because it wasn't sorry, no disrespect. At least I can't.
No, that manner is already being engaged with another partner we're working in the public space on.
All right.
That is dealing directly with the regulator, and we're in a support role. We were Transparency was one of the founding members that actually got this act that we enjoy together from Mr. Boyd Reid come forward, right? From
which
Mr.
one? Which one?
The present Public Procurement Act has
now says adding in as there are two major things. One, added in, because I spoke to, well, I won't say who, but I will say it would be a person whose point of view is one of those things that in the media they like to say that I wouldn't say unquestionable, but I made sure to ask because I wanted to be clear on it. I saw that they added in another part. I think it's part 6 of 2016, which is sale of disposal of real estate.
No, they've given that right to the minister.
Right, and the thing about it is, this is 2016. We are nearly middle of 2024, towards the end of 2024. And that same section says the regulations have to be passed, which is why, of course, the Procurement Act never saw the light of day for years, because he said what I'm trying to say to you, Ravi, and I want to come back to the work of the organization, to be fair to the organization, because you are not to answer for the wrongs or rights of things. You are there to be an advocate for the rights of people and point out things, and that is your responsibility. You're not there to, so I don't, it's not fair to do that to your organization. But what I will say is this, and you'll have to understand where the this sort of view that if you speak to the man in the street, they almost have lost kind of, they almost feel a sense of helplessness that they can't change anything because they are not, they haven't got power. And a good example was when we did not have the procurement legislation. We did not have the procurement legislation, but we did have the Freedom of Information Act, which it tried to extend the period by which you could ask for information, and they were not successful in Parliament. But it was in relation to the 25,000 houses to be built in San Fernando. I'm not going to go back through it because it's not fair to you to ask you to answer that. But when it was revealed, because the JCC pressured and got it, they were a good pressure group there, but they had, as the person said, they had skin in the game. So they had a reason to want to pressure it.
We're going to be working closely with.
Well, they know that happened in 2019. And when they were.
If I may say this, Transparency, Trinidad Chamber, AmCham. I was in AmCham at that time.
Okay.
And TTMA, TTTI. This was the amalgamation, the coalition of the private sector, civil society engagement that came together.
Right.
TTTI was a core founding member of.
Okay.
Right? JCC and TTTI were there, and then the amalgamation grew, right? So we have the act now, and since the act has been.
But I want to stick to what was said. I don't want to go off at that point because I am here asking you as a representative of, and in all good faith, for me and for the rest of the national community to believe that Trinidad and Tobago
So the issue of the procurement plan is
really not a talk shop. Really not, we talk about a little thing, but really not making a real dent in the issues of corruption.
Karen, all I can promise you is, and I can promise the public, is that we make earnest effort. I can't promise anything more than that.
So what's the point then?
No, the point is that we have to continue to try, because in so much as the act itself has been changed 3 or 4 times and government to government relations have been moved out, you will notice currently that there are challenges. I think there are 3 challenges listed on the OPR's website for contracts, which is a new feature, right? I think, okay, there's a sense of, disaffection there when you say, well, what's the point, right? The point is that we're a sovereign, we're a perpetuity. Right. So whenever we get this correct, there's untold years of benefit to be had. So we have no choice. So if I don't get it correct.
What have you all done to help it to move it forward? That's really what I'm asking. I'm sorry if I seem to be like but it's really because I'm trying to help. It may not seem so, but I'm really trying to say
on the public procurement front.
So on the public procurement front, Institute does not do some. It does do more than just talk about things and publish the CPI. You might not know this, but quietly they will.
I'll share something with you. I may get in trouble. I'll share something with you. There is a discussion at the board on exactly how much more visible we should be. This is an engagement our own members are asking of us, right? And as the situation gets more hard outside here, everyday life, the calls are going to become more. And I understand sometimes these calls may seem imbalanced, but I understand where they're coming from. They're depending on institutions to function, right? So
that's what I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah, and in spite of all of that, it's not going to deter me or TTTI from doing, what we have to try and get done for the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago. So under public procurement, that is something we are going to be continuously engaging with other partners. Now, the JCC has taken a pivotal role. The president of the JCC, Fazir, has been writing.
I had him on 2 weeks ago. He was very
So,
good.
so it's a network of colleagues. There's some things we'll go point on, and this is something that they're going to point on, right? So that there's that. The third thing I want to tell you about, and it's not discussed, and we're trying to get it activated, is campaign finance.
Right, because I have it right here. I have it right here.
So those three buckets are the advocacy that we are trying to harmonize around to increase transparency of government action. Okay.
Okay.
That is the push and that is the direction.
Ravi, I'm going to say something, and I don't want you to take it.
If I walked into a minefield admitting to the third point, please explain.
No. I had that discussion. I had David Abdullah on, and he told me that the campaign financing legislation it comes under a different name, and we just joined by a cash test. I like to recognize the people who join us and appreciate that. David Abdullah had come on, and no, we were talking about refining.
The representation of the people.
The union. He talked about the campaign financing, and he said he sent me a copy, but he said that it's a fairly good piece of legislation, and it's based on the Jamaican model, where they would have a registrar just for campaign
political parties, yes,
political parties,
and they're going to register and regulate political parties,
and that the state would provide funding depending on the size of the party, etc. That also in terms of being on television and getting exposure.
But most importantly,
I didn't say anything about yours, though. That's what I'm trying to say.
Most importantly in all of that is that in the amendment tabled in 2020 is the fact that a political party is now defined in the bill. Which was I can read it for you, but in the existing law for the Representation of the People Act, there's enforcement on individuals, but a political party is not defined. Right. There's no requirement for a political party to disclose anything.
So are you saying that your institute played a pivotal role in that? That's really what I'm getting at.
No, we are onboarding that because this bill has been laid in Parliament in the Law House on the 14th of October 2020. It has sat in committee since then and has not.
That's usual.
No, it's usual, but the bill.
It's usual under this government. That's what it is.
I'll rephrase.
Talk, and nothing happens.
I'm not going to take that bit.
But it's the truth.
I think part of that is attributable to all governments to an extent. But
they beat. They have a saying, try to beat all cockfight. They beat all cockfight. The Economic Advisory Board that headed by Dr. Terence Farrell fell apart in less than a year. In less than a year, that board fell apart. They fired, and let me stick to the implementation. I want to go into anything else and how you all have helped. With that, the 5,000 houses with the Chinese company that had apparently been blacklisted by the World Bank or whatever. The reason why that contract had to be ended by the Prime Minister in September is because of that same year after they had a big opening and they had a framework agreement whilst he was the Minister of Housing for a very short period, and he moved Randall Mitchell from housing to tourism where he still is, and the Prime Minister took over that portfolio for a few months, and within 3 days or 4 days, because I wrote it down, because I have to be careful, I have to protect myself too. The framework agreement was signed, and then there was a big opening in Hyatt. Well, of course, the JCC people knew what was in that contract. They knew what was in that contract. When it became known to the national community, the contents, which I'm not going into, but I don't know what the penalty for the Prime Minister had to come forward and say he had to scuttle it. So I would say JCC did something. Then the next thing I would say the JCC did something was when the other 475 million or thereabouts to build houses in Santa Rosa. And I was on another show because I don't have information. Whoever said I do not have inside information. I'm sorry to tell you, and I can assure you, if I did, it would have been disclosed to the national community to destroy me and shut me up, and they have not been able to do that. So when the 475 million contract on another show, I said, because partly the lawyer and partly because I was in government, partly because I have my own views, I said, yes, they did the first three right, but don't you realize that Mr. NH, who is good friends with the Prime Minister, keeps talking about the request for proposal? You don't notice he keep talking about what the 60/40, how much townhouses, how much single houses. You don't see he keep talking about that. You don't see he's trying to say that if what was, and I don't know that because the CEO has not told us why. It just shut it down. And the Prime Minister, which he's known to do, deflect, start talking about a steel ban. He wasn't talking about the steel ban from when it came in there. And the country have no money at all. Put it on up. Somebody give a good idea. Put it on.
If we had open data on this, fishing for this transaction.
Mr. Emil Elias clearly indicated that something with the 60/40 thing, and I said it, and they read it out. All of a sudden, no explanation. That they done. I didn't hear Transparency International involved in that. Maybe you all helped. I don't know.
No, you did not hear from us, and this is something we are actually actively trying to get better at. Which is,
you need to get. You know what you need to get better at? You need to get better at too. No, if you are doing what you say you're doing, either you do it or you become a talk shop. And I'm not trying to be unfair to you. I'm trying to understand. And you know what is coming from this? I'm sorry to say this, but what is coming from this is that a lot of the members are people who are already in the business community, sitting in positions in companies, big companies in this country, or have qualifications.
I would like to correct one thing.
No, but you see what happens is it's all a question of
TTTI right now on the issue of corruption. This is a topic that's not getting traction in Trinidad and Tobago.
But this is up to you all.
It's not only up to us. It's not only up to us. We are trying, but there's only so far we can go. So let me tell you something. I do
not want to offend you. I think the one thing I would say is that the Corruption Perception Index, I am very helpful to the country. And you stopped me from saying this, but it didn't stop me. But but it is relevant to what you were saying, and it came from the mouth of the minister himself. So I am not being because the point you were making about why this thing with corruption is such a critical issue, because it discourages investment in the country. That is what you said. You said that. Okay, well, that same minister, at paragraph 29 or 19 is one of them. He said, in trying to get the support for his version of the TTRA, which is one I had advocated, except for the one with the enforcement officer, who, anyway, that's a whole, I'm going into that. But he said that the fiscal imbalance is so huge. It's been 15 years, except for 1 year. He said it because of Ukraine and Russia. He said it. He said that the rating agency, that's who matter. Moody's, Standards and Poor's, those are who matter. Because when you have a foreign direct investor, that's where you're going to look at. You're going to look at CPI for sure, but you're going to look at those for sure. And he said in his affidavit, in his witness statement, that those rating agencies have told them, the government, that if they do not get their fiscal, I think they want the balance, that they are going to have to downgrade Trinidad and Tobago. Now, that is something, if you want to tell me that you're doing something along the lines where you're putting the kind of pressure on the government that it cannot continuously take money out of the HSF, floating bonds, to the extent to which all Dr. Arjun, all the big economists said, they said if you take out the debt that is owing on those bonds, which is owed in US dollars, and really leave what we really have in foreign exchange as a result of goods and services, one of them to 134 million, one's at 431 million US. However you cut it, is nothing in the billions. Now, if you come and start talking about those things, people do not understand when you tell them things are hard, People do not understand that, They cannot relate to that, because they make sure that the man at the bottom end gets his little piece of something, whether legally or illegally. They cannot relate to what you are saying. What they cannot relate to what you are saying. They are not seeing it. They are not feeling it. And when you talk about real GDP and the Gini coefficient, they don't even know what the heck you're talking about. Right? But you know what it means. And that is where, in all due respect to your institute, if your institute is a lobby group or an awareness group or whatever it is, sees itself as, in my respectful opinion, I think a major problem is 10 years nearly for this government. I was only there for 2.5 years, and I'm not bigging up myself. But in 2.5 years, whether you like it or not, I got the Property Tax Act passed. Whether you like it or not, I got the Revenue Act passed in the lower house. Whether you like it or not, I got the Financial Institutions Act passed, which is what got Pico into all the trouble because they couldn't do that intercompany borrowing, etc., etc. Whether you like it or not, the TTIFC, I had someone in my office who had done it for Ireland, actually drafting the legislation for the TTIFC whilst dealing with CL Financial. So if in 2.5 years, sorry to tell you, if in 2.5 years, and by the way, I'm not boasting on myself, but I'm trying to show I don't want to hear those excuses. Because when NACTA did their poll 2 weeks before the elections, I had the highest approval rating in the country at 98%, even though I was the Minister of Finance with all the other things I was dealing with the oil dropping to $35 in January. So if in 2.5 years with a Prime Minister I had that was a workhorse, that didn't make joke with you, he was result oriented. If I was able to ask in 2.5 years, what is stopping this government in 10 years for achieving anything of any magnitude that affects and after that dragon field, that going nowhere now because America is not fighting us. America is not fighting Trinidad. In fact, America is fighting Venezuela. And as long as America is fighting Venezuela and Maduro, his Supreme Court, 2 days ago, said he won the elections, right? So they are not going to help Maduro. They are going to starve him as they're doing. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm not getting into their politics. I am getting the fact that dragon field that has 4.3 trillion cubic feet of gas. You telling me that is why Shell never signed the final investment decision for dragon field because they could only get 2 years and the 2 years nearly up, but they will do the manatee because the manatee part is in our waters. But that can't even begin to meet the needs of the downstream industry or LNG. So when you have a government sitting down there, and what are you all saying? What are you all saying?
May I speak now?
I definitely got you, Mr. Rock. Not going to speak.
So first things first. Anybody that knows me will tell you I'm very opinionated. But I'm here for a specific purpose.
Right.
And that is in my duty to Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute.
Right.
One, we are an institution rebuilding. We have our challenges. It is not an excuse. It's just where we are. We don't have the bandwidth or capacity to pursue all that we've discussed. That's why we've narrowed it down. In the fullness of time, we would like to. So for your wider viewing audience, this is a clarion call. Please feel free to look us up. Please feel free if you feel so inclined to join the fight. We'd love to hear from you. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we still are doing things. There's an anti-corruption conference we're hosting on October 24th. I'll get the Secretariat to provide you details. We should have a save the date and an agenda out shortly. And it kind of dovetails into the topics we covered today, the priority areas I told you that we want to get it a big platform and a big discussion. So campaign finance reformation is the second half of the event. It's also in speaking with, how to put this, it's about restoration of trust, of the people's trust, but this time the focal point of the conference is accountability. So I think that that's been the theme of your tutoring me on some things here.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm talking to
No,
the.
no, listen, I'm being a little mischievous. That's fine, and I do like.
Sorry if I came across that.
I know I do like the conversation, and
Yeah.
I'm not thin-skinned as neither are you. We have to be. There's nothing wrong in being passionate about what we speak about, but
Right.
sometimes people don't pay attention to the message; they only see the
Yeah.
passion.
Yes.
I like to see passionate engagement because that means people are attached to the issues.
Yes.
I don't
Right.
like to see kind of laissez-faire responses because I really don't know where the true sense in the matter is, right?
Right. Yes.
So I get the sense that you're one with conviction that one person can make a difference, and I share that view. I may not be reflecting that to you today,
You
but
are sort of, you are doing it,
I have, as I've gotten older, I have learned what my father.
I'm gonna move my computer because it's gonna die just now. But
I've
I'm
learned what
listening.
my father most wished for me, which is restraint. But in the other things you spoke about, that we have to get more visible. Absolutely, there's no fight here, Karen. We've heard
Yes.
that from other stakeholders we've been speaking to. We've been rebuilding, and hopefully this won't be the last time I'll be on your show, or others from TTTI. This is meant to, as we get our advocacy aligned, as we get the secretariat in order for the new work program. We want to give our membership as well a sense of what's going on, because what you're saying is what we've heard from membership. There's nothing new there. And proper leadership requires onboarding that. The outcome of this is an application of hard work. I don't know what the outcomes are. I can't tell you what the work will yield, but there's a dedication towards those things we spoke about. And it is not to be inflammatory with the government or civic society or the private sector. The thing is, aside from the passion attached to the issue, we should be able to converse in a balanced and fair manner, because if we are not conversing, if the government is not conversing with the private sector and civic society, this thing can't work. And if civic society constantly says, you government are the whole fault, this thing can't work. So it is our nature to do that, right? That's why I started off by saying I think we all have a level of complicitness in the problem, be it 1% or 100%, whatever it is. The government, in giving benefits to its citizens that are now unsustainable, is it a fault of theirs if they wanted to give their citizens these things as a benefit? That's a philosophical question that, I mean, if it was me, I'd try and probably help people. But as we're now seeing over the last few years, there's a desubsidization of fuel that has taken place. There's a desubsidization of electricity taking place. You just have to not hear what is being said, but watch what is being done. We are coming closer and closer to open market operations on what we can sustain. And that's the fact of the matter. That is the environment and the situation and the numbers driving that conversation. How it's packaged and how it's said, I try not to get, I don't listen to what people say, I watch what they do. So the things they do identify what's important to them, right? So having said all of that, TTTI is still here. Mr. Dumas passed, but Mr. Boyd has passed. We've lost some great warriors, but there's a younger generation coming up, and the challenges for TTTI now are vastly different than before. So it's not just corruption. Corruption has become an amorphous discussion. It's no longer that discussion, that definition I read off the website with you, right? It has gotten complicated. The human condition, you are challenged about right and wrong.
And I think IT and artificial intelligence has come.
Yeah,
All of that.
it's our human experience itself. Some
Mhm.
days feels like, to me, I'm in a washing machine. I'm getting tumbled all the time, right? No, I mean, you have one of those days, the phone don't stop moving, you just which way is up,
But don't worry, Karavia, come out cleaner.
No, but so given all of that, our challenge is to cut through all of that and
Mhm.
anchor the necessity to take on this conversation about corruption and to
Yeah.
take on the conversation about what is correct and due process. So if it means being in conversations like this and holding firm to show our mettle, it'll be our pleasure.
Mhm.
But the one thing we cannot commit to, I don't know what the outcomes will be. Our
Mhm.
responsibility is to do the task, to do
Mhm.
it responsibly, to do it with our best effort, in earnest,
Yes.
and the rest we have to leave to higher powers. I can't.
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
can't promise these things. I've learned not to promise how people will behave.
That's true.
So, I mean, in part of the wider discussion, corruption used to be, you know,
A narrow kind of
yeah,
definition.
it's a taboo, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
now, I mean, even if you watch global politics, things have changed. It's
Mhm.
not the way I see it. And if you talk to the younger generations, the way they see life is different. So the same thing my father said about me, I'm now saying about the younger generation. I mean, so I think as our perspective moves on, uh,
Mhm.
I mean, this is natural. The world is getting more complicated. And
Yeah.
the only thing in all of that is we require a little bit more patience because we have
Yeah.
to speak more
Yes.
and not be contentious. So if something is said that I disagree with, I
Yeah.
mean, there's a way you can disagree with, right? Even being passionate. But
But we have to be firm too, as no one, as
no,
people
yeah, no, that's fine, that's fine.
a minute too.
No, that's fine. But admitting to our shortcomings is, I think, necessary. It points for improvement that
Yeah.
we are onboarding as a board and working on, right? And
Yeah.
and this,
Mhm.
the below the counter efforts take some time before it is seen above the counter at service level.
True.
And
True.
and we're going through some things that no different from all NGOs and CBOs in a sovereign that's on the decline, right? You
Yeah.
find less engagement, less budgets. Uh,
Yes.
People are becoming very isolationistic,
Yes.
protectionists. Uh,
Yes.
they're becoming insular, right? So these are
Yeah.
all common traits, Karen,
Yeah.
of contraction, right? These are
Yes.
problems of contraction, as you know. We would
Yeah.
like to have the problems of expansion. We want to go back to that.
That's a nice problem to have, right?
Yeah, problems of expansion, not enough human resource, not enough time, people pushing the scale, that.
Yeah.
But to get there, we were
Yeah.
on a glide to this point. To get back there,
Yes.
it's not going to be a short period, but it
No.
befalls us, ma'am, if I may say this in closing, the
Yeah.
same way we enjoy our privileges and freedoms that we did
Yes.
not fight for, that our forefathers fought
Yes.
for our future, not for their
Yes.
benefit.
Yes.
I think that is the responsibility we have.
That is
And I think conscionably, uh,
true.
for the life the Almighty has given us, we must hold to testament what we do with this life.
But we belong to the same church. I want to say because I only have and I hope I can let you really have the last word. I have a lot of respect for Transparency Institute. I think a lot of people in Trinidad do. They're one of the few institutes that people feel have a level of independence and have also persons of quality and persons who can make a difference to Trinidad. So even though I came across maybe a little passionate in what I was saying to you, it's more I have an audience, and I want the audience to recognize that you all do have a good reputation. You do have a good reputation, and you can't. It's when you look at it's like say Coca-Cola or any company that I think when you look at the thing, it is the brand that is more important than anything, and you all have that brand. And all I was trying to do, maybe not. We got a Terry Skin, and I like to not acknowledge my people that follow us. But what I really want to say is I do respect. That's why I went off. I wrote and wrote. I was not to be stopped. I said I'm going to try and get these people
But
on the.
first of all, I want to apologize that it took you that long and hard to get it. You have my information now. You feel free. I'll make sure the board gets it, and
Right.
you will have the ear and attention of the
And I
board.
want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to know that of all we don't have many NGOs that have the stature and international stature of Transparency International and the respect that it does have amongst the people. And I feel when they say that we are 41, 40, we no longer 40, we're 41, whatever we are now on the corruption perception index. That's only a small part of what you do. And I just hope that this program will act as an incentive because you have been a very good advocate and representative only merely because of your sincerity to me, that it came across to me. I hope to the listeners of your commitment to Trinidad and Tobago. And I hope that whatever I said, if it came across a little passionate, was never intended to be
Absolutely.
an attack on thing, but it was really to sort of push you to tell the people, listen, we are here to stay and we are doing the work and there are challenges, but we're not throwing any bad thing. We're going to fight it out, but we need you. And so you can, if we have about a minute left, and I'd like you to wind it up. And I want to thank
I
you
would
very
firstly,
much.
I want to thank you for having us.
Mhm.
Thank Power 102 for the job that they do.
Yes,
Um, and on behalf of TTTI, it's a
yes.
clarion call for all those who want to join the fight.
Mhm.
Or if you just have some free time and you want to pitch in,
Well,
whatever.
tell them where you all are, because I know you're not far from.
So we're in the Fernandez compound.
Yeah,
We're listed. I will get
let's Google
you.
it. I googled you all. I was
Yeah,
so insistent. I
we're
got all the way.
listed, and the secretariat's there. Koenig Charles is
Yeah,
available, and Cindy is also there.
very
Uh,
sweet young lady, I have to say.
please,
Very
please
clear
feel
talk
supported.
for
Yep.
me.
And I look forward to future interactions. I want to wish you all the best. I want to wish the listening public, the viewing public, a safe and continued well-being in their personal
And
lives.
believe. We have to believe. Believe.
Oh, we
That's what
will, we will. I mean, Karen, when I'm off here, I'll talk to you a different way. I don't like losing. I don't think anybody likes losing.
Oh Lord, that is a serious
No, no, no.
statement.
When I say this, I came to Trinidad. Trinidad has given me a life. I owe it everything,
Oh my Lord, that
and
is a wonderful
I
thing
owe
to
it
do.
everything. And
That's
in
a,
this country, I have discovered myself.
oh my God.
My
Oh my
criticisms does not come from a position of hate or detriment. My position comes from the fact that I see what it is, I see what it can be, and I am completely enamored with it.
Right. And I'm going to tell you, David McIntyre is sitting on there quietly, but want to tell me, Karen, you have spent 3 minutes more than you're supposed to be on this show. Right.
But thank you.
So we're going to have to say good evening. Thank you very much for coming on. And I wish the Transparency Institute, the Tobago chapter, all the best. Encourage people to join because I do think you do good work and you do have a good reputation. You got good brand equity and you're doing good for the country. You just need to be a little bit probably more visible. And I'm sure you're working on that. So thank you so much and have a good evening. And to all the listeners, all of you who came and showed your face, and we're glad to have you on. Come all the time. We want to see you all. All right. Take care.
Have a good day. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I look forward to
Okay.
having this gentleman
David,
back in the program, Karen.
what's that?
I hope that you bring him back for
I
a
am
part
going
two.
to ask them. I'm going to ask him to come back on.
Yeah,
And yes. So you thought it was worth the
of
having?
course, of
Yes.
course.
Okay. And
Yes.
by the way, for the listeners, this is the person I talk to all the time and say, so what do you think? How do you think it went? All right, so I'm gone. Have a good
Okay.
evening. Yeah?
You too. Be safe.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
That's it
Take
for today's edition of Hard Talk with host Karen Nunez Teixeira. It was all about corruption in its various iterations.